tre ifrån Sverige. May I then change to English, and we will start the discussion by introducing ourselves. Jag är då Birgitta Holstalani, direktör för Svenska institutet Alexandria. Please.
And I'm Carl Rudbeck. I'm a Swedish journalist and writer, and I have, during many years, dabbled in questions concerning politics and religion.
My name is Moustafa Zayed. I'm an author and a lecturer in both Egypt and the United States of America.
And I'm Anders Weird, Archbishop of Church of Sweden. I was supposed to be Egyptian, but as Bishop Thomas could not come, I was asked to just join the panel on short notice.
And my name is Desiree Petrus, and I'm a member of Parliament for the Christian Democratic Party. Thank you.
That the Muslim Brotherhood, that is now the most important actor in Egypt, was previously filling a vacuum that was left by the previous dictatorships, the previous governments, by their establishing schools and medical clinics and so on for poor people. It was a social movement, not a political one. But in Egypt's first democratic election in 2012, Dr. Morsi from the Muslim Brotherhood became the president. The Muslim Brotherhood changed from an opposition social movement dedicated to the reform of all society into a competitive political party by the formation of the Freedom and Justice Party. The Salafists have also enjoyed electoral success, despite having much less political experience than the Muslim Brotherhood. These religious groups are now formed into political parties with growing involvement in politics. But they are unexperienced in their new environment and seemingly unaware and unable to control the ways politics will change them. It should at the same time be said that Egypt is not following Iran's path toward theocracy. But when religion enters the political sphere, it will not remain unchanged. All parties, liberals, leftists, rightists, Islamist parties, all talk about democracy, the way towards democracy, and how shall it be reached. As the religious parties are in the lead, they have to combine democratic reforms with Islam. And I would like to put the first question, whether that is possible to, and Mr. Moustafa, is it possible to combine the two, democratic reforms with Islam, in your view?
Actually, we need to differentiate between the law as Islam and Sharia law and the application of some. Because no matter how great a law or an ideology is, it always depends upon the quality of the people who applies it. Dr. Amani had criticized the way that the Muslim Brotherhood per se have pursued their rights, during the Egyptian democracy, but their faults are theirs. When we talk about Islam as an ideology, actually democratic consultation and movement of society is a fundamental part of Islam. In the chapter, in the Quran, the Holy Quran called Shura, which is Islamic democracy or consultation, the verse that spoke about two of the greatest aspects of Islam as a religion, which is praying to your Creator and giving charity to the poor, in the middle was that these believers consult all their matters amongst themselves. As a matter of fact, the first leader in Islam was democratically elected. All the major leaders of the tribes gathered in Suqaifat Bani Sa'ida and actually debated amongst each other that their prospective leaders should be the leader of the entire Muslim nation, till they debated it, and then Abu Bakr, the companion of the Prophet, became the first leader. And that was the norm for 3 or 4 leaders after that, till there was a feud historical of Ali and Muawiyah, and then it became almost like kingship, which is also a prophecy of Prophet Muhammad himself.
So, Moustafa, if I understand you correctly, your view is that, yes, they are compatible. Islam with democracy.
Very compatible,
yes.
But there's one distinction that I want to make clear. The difference between our Western democracy and Islamic democracy is that it's not wide open for people to decide on everything in society and, make pillars of society as they go. There are fundamental pillars and a major structure that is put by Sharia law. In between, you fulfill the goals of Sharia law, which is protection of children, lives, properties, reason, and religion. And within that, society can determine whatever they want, however they want.
Okay,
according to the
much.
mechanism of traditional democracy.
Thank you very much. Very, very short comment, Carl.
Well, I would just
The mic.
Your President. Of course, Islam and democracy are compatible, but what kind of democracy? I think what you're really asking is Islam compatible with liberal democracy, and there I'm not so sure that the answer is as simple as yes or no.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, the role of religion is not limited to the Muslim parts of the world, of course. Protestant Christianity plays an extremely important role in the US, for example, in the politics there, in setting the moral boundaries and concerns in political discussions. And it can therefore be considered to be a very important political institution in some sense. Now, I would like to turn to our Swedish participants and ask whether, does religion in Sweden have an impact on public life and politics before and now? What do you say? Shall we start with Desiree?
Okay, I just wanted to give a brief background from the Swedish history, because in Sweden we had, the state and the church was united, but they didn't fulfill the needs of the population for reforms and to get all these social welfare systems. And for that, the free churches and actually the social democratic and the labor movement joined together and made a lot of reforms. And I think the Muslim Brotherhood is maybe something that was reflecting that religion was okay, but it wasn't important, and it was impossible for them to have any political influence. And I think that the churches, everyone has to participate in the society, in the discussion, how we are going to reform our democracy. So, of course, we can have a combination, but it's very important that if we, as a Christian Democratic Party, for example, would have the power in the Swedish parliament and have a single majority, then we would have also to have policies that could be compliant and could be accepted by the Muslim people, believers in this country. So it's very important. It's one vote, and it's for everyone to be able to participate. But if we have to respect all religions within a society, so the policies and the politics and all the legislation has to be non-confessional. And so that's, for my party, for example, it's in our statutes that we are a non-confessional party. So separate state and religion. But, of course, we are combined in many things like the values and the core values of our society.
Thank you very much. Anders Weiryd?
I think it's it's hard to see what is always there. Therefore, it's very difficult to say what impact religion actually does have on our ways of thinking. It's interesting to see how the social welfare system differs in Northern Europe and Southern Europe, even though, of course, these are evened out over time now within the EU. But in Northern Europe, we have this natural idea that social security should build on the right of the individual to expect help and to give help. And that is, of course, a Protestant way of looking at it. It's a way of secularizing the ethics in a way. And that is something that you can share regardless of belief. If you are religious or not, well, you have an obligation to help, and you are obliged to help. In some other traditions, we have more of this, that if you do good deeds, if you are beneficial, if you have a good heart, this is something that God actually counts upon. It's a good thing for you in eternity. And that has never been a big thing in the Lutheran tradition, in the Northern European. So, of course, we can see in all kinds of details, religion has an impact, but we cannot so easily recognize it. So I would say it sure does still. And when we talk about liberal democracy here, we, of course, also mean, even though all issues can be brought up, that there are constitutional issues, that are human rights issues. Also, those can be discussed, but we have to be able to give reasons for them. So they go in each other.
Thank you very much. Carl?
Of course, I agree with most of what's been said already, but I would go so far as to say that democracy is a result of Christianity. It might be surprising to hear that from me since I'm not a believer, but I think that the fact that democracy has arisen in Western Europe and nowhere else, Mustafa and I might quarrel about this later, but democracy is a Western invention. It came through the Enlightenment, and the Enlightenment, which in its core was atheistic and anti-monarchistic and very egalitarian, is still a child of Christianity. So I think that Christianity has been crucial for the development of democracy. And as Anders said, we don't notice that all the time, but and this is rather a subject for a dissertation, that the relationship between Christianity and democracy is very intimate and very complicated. It has been conflicts now and then, but basically they're children of the same spirit.
Thank you very much. Yes, you were touching upon now, Carl, what I was going to ask actually and to talk about, the relationship between the Christianity and democracy, because we see the most democracies in the Christian part of the world. Is that so that there is such a relationship, or could it be the fact that dictators took over in the Muslim part of the world when the Western colonizers left the Middle East and North Africa? I mean, if we now limit us to that area in the world, and therefore democracy didn't have a chance to be developed at all. Europe and the West has not been colonized and could develop itself through a long process, more or less uninterrupted, towards democracy. What is your comment to that?
My comment,
please.
Yes, of course, the Western powers have a great share of guilt for what's happening in the Middle East today and all over what used to be called the Third World, because we refused to apply the same rules there as we applied to ourselves. We treated these peoples in a very in a very high-handed, arrogant fashion, and we have to pay the price for that now. We draw lines on the map and call that country and that country, and and those democratic stirrings which were found in the Middle East from early several hundred years ago, starting in the Ottoman Empire. We saw it in Iran about 100 years ago. We see it in Egypt. Were stifled by Western intervention, often, it must be pointed out, in cahoots with the dominant classes in those societies. The landowning class in Iran and in Syria and also in Egypt were very, very friendly with the imperialist masters, and that was detrimental to the development of democracy.
Thank you. Mustafa?
I agree with that notion. After for example, in Egypt, the English occupation ceased to exist in Egypt, there were brutal military dictatorships that destroyed Egypt. We were talking yesterday that actually my father used to give 1 Egyptian pound in 1952 to the bank and get 1 English pound of gold that is now worth 2,500. So the $1 that we have now, you multiply it by 2,500 times to get the same $1, 1 Egyptian pound at the time in 1952 in one lifetime. Specifically the Islamic movement that represents the collective identity of the Egyptian people for 1,400 years were so oppressed to mindless ways. And actually the rise of Islamic democracy, the Islamic movement in Egypt, whether the Muslim Brotherhood or the Salafi, is like you were pressing a bull underwater and then you just let go and it popped out that strongly. So I agree 100% with Carl when it comes to that regard.
To give them some times as well. But of course, as I want to say, is that it needs a profound respect for all the different religions within Egypt. I mean, the Coptic population is about 10%. So it has to be respected that everyone, and that's even for atheists, people who don't believe, they also should feel that this constitution and this country is open for me, and I should be respected and I will be protected. So I hope that the leadership and the Muslim Brotherhood will really have a serious dialogue.
Yes, thank you very much. Anders?
I think it's we ought to reflect over the fact, even though history never develops the same way in different places, but I mean, the European country with Sharia laws, if you could talk about something like that, is Sweden. Look at Sweden's 17th century. A move back from a more humanitarian understanding from the Catholic tradition to an Old Testament literal reading of how you should be punished and so on. And it's so interesting that this came in, well, of course, through the Reformation, when it became very national, the Christian church. But it didn't work. It worked for some 100 years or so. And why is that? Is it because there is such a strong international trait in Christianity that made it impossible to be so nationalistic? Well, maybe. It's very hard to see that Christianity should be limited to any special persons if you look at the New Testament time, because it goes over boundaries. And of course, in 385, this becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire. But that's a couple of 100 years before that. And Christianity was also established in other parts of the world, where it was not established, not ruling, but had to live as one movement among others, one religion among others. Maybe this has given also a flexibility to Christianity to exist without being in power, so to speak. And this is, of course, something that we have to come back to now when we have to orient ourselves in a new situation. And if I am very daring, and I don't know if this holds, I could perhaps say that the doctrine of Trinity is a help here. Because for Christians, it is quite natural to think that God is linked to every person, regardless of if she or he believes or not. Everyone is dependent upon God. The religious practice is limited to those who acknowledge Jesus and so on. But with this distinction that God has different persons and sides, maybe it's easier to acknowledge a common democratic ground, a common societal commitment that doesn't have to link up with religion than it would be if religion and society is more identified with each other, also in theory.
Well, that was darefull to say. Thank you very much. Carl?
I think very good point here that Christianity was for a long time a minority religion. It was persecuted, and it was the underdog, while Islam very quickly became the dominant religion in the Islamic areas. It has not until very recently been used to the role as a minority religion, and that creates sort of the same problems for Islam today as for Christianity long time ago. I would also make a point, and here I'm afraid I speak a little bit out of school, but I think that the image of Christ is important also, because Christ is a kind of loser in the eyes of the world, while Muhammad is a winner. And I think that the God as a loser sort of creates a different point of view, a different sort of tolerance than Muhammad or Allah as winners.
Okay, good. Now, of course, religion brings with it a set of moral values which becomes part of the culture. The 10 Commandments that we all know are more or less the basis for all the big religions. Don't steal, don't kill, and so on and so on. But the text of the Quran, which is the main source, of course, of the Sharia, differs from the Bible in that it deals with many topics addressed by secular law. For instance, like crimes, politics, economics, as well as personal matters like diet, prayer, hygiene, fasting, marriage, inheritance, and so on and so forth. So this detailed rules in the Quran, how is it possible now? Can the rules from the Quran, which is more than 1,000 years old, 1,400 years old, still be applied in today's society, in today's politics? I would like to put that question first to Mr. Moustafa.
Thank you. Actually, we do not need someone opinion or a scholar of Islam opinion. If you objectively look at the world around us, it's not only possible that they are applied, actually people are pursuing it. For example, Pope Benedict, the Pope who just resigned his position in 2009, announced in the Observatorio Romano that he gave his directive to the Vatican Bank to start to adapt to Sharia principles of investments, because after the collapse of financial markets in 2008, the only investments worldwide that did not collapse were Sharia-compliant investments. There's a big debate in America about taxations, and everybody is moving towards actually a simple tax code. I give you this proposition. How about there's no income tax, federal tax, sales tax, property tax, or inheritance tax? Tax in Islamic law, the law as mandated by God in the Quran, is after you spend all your money on whatever that you want to spend it on, and 1 year you have an amount of money that stayed with you, you had no need for, you pay 2.5% to the government. So it's asset-based taxation, not income-based taxation. Whenever that was applied, it was the highest living standard in the world. Inheritance laws, doctrines as far as social reforms that people want to apply. If you look even at Islamic countries, there's about 58 Islamic countries. Open the map, the lowest AIDS infections in the world are there. Even it houses some of the poorest countries in the world. The lowest ratios of suicides, the lowest ratios of divorce, fertility. There's so many things that directly are derived from Sharia law. The most important thing is that when we listen to Sharia, we listen to scholars of Islam. For example, people talk about Sharia law as it's a very harsh punishment code. For example, they say for adultery, it's stoning like the Old Testament. In the first 1,000 years of Islam, not one single case was caught and punished by stoning. Only 3 cases, and it was adamant confessions. So people talk about these draconian things and speak about these angry people in some tent village in Afghanistan and Pakistan that are doing crazy things in the name of Islam or Sharia. Beware, you are staring at poverty, not Islam.
But Mustafa, don't we read sometimes, I mean, about the punishment for theft, for example, to cut a hand or so? Where is that?
A very good point. The conditions for that is like the conditions of armed robbery. It has to be breaking and entering, and it has to be an amount that is more than 1/4 of a dinar of gold. For example, the only one country that applies that law with death penalty and cutting the hand of an armed robber is Saudi Arabia. The record number of these punishments in 1 year was 60 cases. That is just 2 days of violent crimes in America. Every single day, the 34 cases of people gunned down because of the gun problem that we have there. If you live in a country, aside from the other social phenomena and the prejudice, would you want to live in a country where 34 people are gunned every single day? Or if somebody breaks and enters your house, trying to kill you for your money, would be punished and actually deterred from doing that by Sharia law? The answer is yours.
Okay, now I think I would like to ask the audience if you have any questions or any comments. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Davud. I'm from Iran. I'm an exiled journalist living in Sweden. I have a question addressing to Mr. Mustafa. The first thing is about selecting Abu Bakr. That you told that was a very fair election. But it's from your perspective, because the Shia has a different...
There were no Shia then.
Okay. But now more than 100 million Shias are living around the world. And some of them are in Egypt. And during these times, they are getting killed by Salafis. The second thing is regarding about the execution and death penalty. I think if you just look at in Iran, it's not because of poverty. You mentioned Pakistan and Afghanistan. It's in Iran, more than 400 death penalty just last year happened. It's all about how you read the Quran and how you want to Quran rule the public. It's impossible.
So you're saying the government in Iran is making a mistake, or what are you saying?
Of course, because they use Quran to verdict for the execution and cutting hands. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have another question.
Dear Mr. Mustafa, I am from India, but I have this. I understand you're Salafi, as you said, right? And also to the other panels, like, what do you? You're right in the middle of the peak point of Swedish democracy. How do you see, as a Salafist, that, and how should a Muslim Salafist take into the view that women dress, maybe totally undress in this country, and would like to have this right? Would you, as a Salafist, accept this also in Egypt?
Well, not even a Salafi, as a prophet of God, God himself tells Prophet Muhammad, you're not but a reminder. You're not to control them. Say the truth. Whoever would be a believer would be a believer. Whoever would not believe would not believe. So the maximum that you can say is God had sent us a prophet after the other. We're an Islamic code of dress, for example. Look at any picture of Virgin Mary in any church. That is exactly the Islamic code of dress. And by the way, in Islam, the greatest woman that ever lived and will ever live is none but Virgin Mary. My daughter name is Maryam. She's nothing like Virgin Mary, but at least we got the name. So you say that, well, it's for a woman to show her face and her hand and not to have her curvature or the details of her body shown. Whoever want to follow, fine. Whoever would not follow, would not follow. But Prophet was there. He mentioned it. I mentioned it. He's a witness. There's no imposing anything upon anyone else.
So you will accept that women have the right to go in bikini in Egypt?
No, women have the right to decide for their own selves what to do. I have the right to, with the permission of people also, to tell them what is the right thing to do. And then there's common law. In any country of the world, there's a line in the sand. For example, if you wear a bikini in certain places in New York, you would be arrested. New York, the liberal country of the United States of America. If you have a bottle of wine and walk in openly in the street, you'd be arrested. It has to be covered. And the person who sold it to you would do that. So there is a law. It's called indecent exposure law. And that is up to any country. In China, it's stricter. It's more liberal in Europe, and so on and so forth. So as a society, I am not the society. As a society, there's a law that draws the line in the sand. Collectively, using democratic mechanism, we decide where the line is drawn on every matter. But from a religious perspective, I advise, and people are free to take it or not to take it.
Okay, thank you. We have other questions now. We have first here.
Yes, Mr. Mustafa, with all respect for your religion, it's not very representative for the Muslims. I work as an international electoral observer, and I've been to so many Islamic countries, and many of them are very secularized as well. And the whole perspective of this debate, it has been very interesting, but I think the original question is wrong, because it would be as well applicable to ask, is Christianity compatible with democracy? It is like Carl said in the beginning, first of all, how do we define democracy? And how do we define Islam? How do we define Christianity? And I must say that in Sweden, this is what I can talk about, how the knowledge about Islam, it is very bad, but at least it's not in most people's views, except for some very specific parties, viewed upon so winkled as you do. Because, for example, the word jihad, we learn it wrongly. It's not a war. Jihad stands for your own way of creating a true reality and relationship to God. So what we need in this country, and probably in all Western countries, to avoid the negative feelings for Islam is more knowledge about it, not this sort of angle-winkled knowledge you give us here now. We need really true knowledge from the beginning, from people who study Islam. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry to say that we have no time for more questions, I have been told. A very short answer.
I thank you so much. Knowledge about Islam is what we lack. If I ask any one of you about what is the first word that comes to your mind about Islam, it would be maybe terrorism, maybe penal codes. I give you a statistic. In the United States, from 1980 to 2005, quarter century, 94% of terrorist attacks planned or actually executed, 94% was not done by Muslims. The FBI had a statistic of the most committing of terrorist crimes and they had a list of 10. Muslims ranked number 9. But if what we show only about Islam is that crazy guy with very angry face, ranting, squinting maybe because he lost his glasses or something, then that's the impression that we're going to get. So you want to learn about Islam, start from the beginning, as the lady had said, and learn about Islam from a scholar. If I want to learn about Judaism, I would ask the rabbi. I would not go to the Nazi party. That's my advice.
Okay, one word. Yeah. The text is one, and the interpretation or the practice is another. Okay. Thank you very much for all the panelists for your contribution to this interesting discussion. And thank you very much, the audience. Thank you.
Thank you.